What's going on, guys? I'm CFB Kings, and welcome back to another episode of the CFBKings Show. Hope everyone is doing well. We're a little over 100 days away from the 2024 season. Under 100 is always where it starts to feel a little bit more real for me each off season, but we're getting there, though. ESPN just put out some of the kickoff times for some week 1 games, so it's really starting to feel real now, but we're getting there. In the meantime, without too much going on in the world of college football, for today's episode, I decided that I wanted to attempt to build the ideal college football program. We're going to be taking different traits, characteristics, and traditions from a bunch of different college football programs and putting them together to make a hypothetically ideal school. Let's get right into it. First things first, the ideal college football program would have to have Alabama's success. 18 claimed national championships, 9 outright national championships, or in other words, 9 seasons where only they were the one that claimed the title. Back in the day, there were a lot of seasons where multiple teams claimed titles and stuff like that, but they have 9 outright national championships with 18 total claimed titles. 30 SEC titles, 4 Heisman winners, 86 consensus All-Americans, 46 bowl wins, and 8 college football playoff appearances. They have 2 of the greatest coaches in the history of the sport, if not the 2 greatest, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But there are a couple other schools that can make a claim for that one, like Ohio State and Oklahoma, and even USC and Michigan to some extent. But for me, the ideal college football program would have to have the success of the Alabama Crimson Tide. This ideal school would be where App State is in Boone, North Carolina. And I know this might not be everyone's choice for this, but some might say Miami or USC or UCLA out in Los Angeles, someplace, tropical or on the beach or something like that. But I've always liked App State's campus up in the mountains, and especially around fall and late into the college football season, it always looks really quite beautiful up there. But I've never been on the campus itself. I've been pretty close near it, but from the pictures and everything that are circulated on social media, it seems like a great place to put the ideal school. On Saturdays in the fall, the ideal college football program's team would have to enter into their stadium like Clemson does. We need Howard's Rock, we need the Hill, we preferably need all the balloons and stuff to be brought back. If you're not familiar, Clemson used to release like thousands of balloons as the players were running down the hill before each game, but I think back in 2020 they stopped after facing pressure to do so for whatever reason. But in my opinion, it's the best entrance in college football, and ESPN announcer Chris Fowler even referred to it in 2016 and 2022 as the grandest entrance in sports.
Heavyweight fights had their ring walks. CFB has Clemson's grandest entrance in sports.
It was also dubbed the most exciting 25 seconds in college football by former announcer Brent Musburger back in 1985. So I posted that I thought Clemson's entrance was the best in college football on Instagram, and was predictably met with some responses that said the best was Virginia Tech's or Colorado's or Florida State's. All great entrances as well, but if you're watching on YouTube, I took to Photoshop and with a little help from an AI image generator was able to create the truly ideal college football entrance. We've got a Clemson player riding Colorado's Buffalo Ralphie down the hill, and if you're listening on podcast, just try to create a mental image. It's pretty vivid, but or just check out the video later on YouTube. But we've got a Clemson player riding Colorado's Buffalo Ralphie down the hill, while Virginia Tech's Enter Sandman is playing on the left side of the screen. That's Lane Stadium in the background. And then the Clemson player on Ralphie is carrying a flaming spear that he will attempt to plant at midfield for Florida State's entrance. And then you could also maybe throw in Miami's smoke, and before planting the spear, they could run through Tennessee's T or something on the way out there. And while all that's going on, you can have Auburn's Eagles flying around the stadium. So that would be the best entrance in college football, but individually, I've got to go with Clemson. Another thing that the ideal school would have to have is Nebraska's fan loyalty. The Huskers are currently on a 396-game sellout streak at Memorial Stadium, dating back to November 3rd, 1962. Now, a lot of people might point out that some of those games were kind of artificially sold out with people buying extra tickets and stuff like that, but the point remains that the Huskers have some of the most loyal fans in our sport. They went from being a perennial national championship contender to now they haven't made a bowl game in 7 consecutive seasons, and the support is just as strong. So our ideal school would have to have Nebraska's fan loyalty. The ideal college football program would have to have the stadium atmosphere of a Penn State whiteout. Just picture that environment when they blocked the field goal and returned it for a touchdown against Ohio State back in 2016, but in this scenario, we'd hypothetically have that for every single home game. There's some others that had strong cases for this one, like Florida and LSU and Clemson and Texas A&M, but a Penn State whiteout environment is tough to beat. Our stadium would need the design of Texas A&M's Kyle Field. If you're watching on YouTube, you can see what it looks like on the outside leading in and how well made it is. And if you're listening on podcasts, I highly recommend either checking out this part of the episode on YouTube or finding some pictures of the outside of Kyle Field if you haven't seen it before or can't remember. It's truly phenomenal. It looks amazing. There's not many stadiums that actually put like real emphasis on how the outside of the stadium looks and the design of it. Usually you can just kind of see the concrete underneath or like the metal of the bleachers or something. That's really small stadiums. But for Kyle Field, they took great measure to make the outside look just as good as everything else. Then on the inside, it's simple but also enormous and pretty intimidating for opposing teams to walk into. It's really tall. It helps keep all the sound in and stuff like that. And really would not want to go on the road to play at that stadium. So that is how I'd want our ideal program stadium to be designed and structured. The ideal program students would have to resemble those at the University of Florida. They have an elite student section for the majority of their sports, but especially football games. They fill up nearly an entire side of the swamp. They're involved, they're passionate, and UF was recently named as a new Ivy League school by Forbes for the success and employability of its graduates. So the way that they're involved in sports, the way that they are in the classroom, for the ideal school, we'd have to have the students at the University of Florida. The ideal college football program would have to have the band from Ohio State. Affectionately referred to as the best damn band in the land, Ohio State has one of the most iconic traditions in the sport that involves the band with dotting the I. They're super creative in what they come up with for halftime shows and stuff like that, and impressive in the way that they're actually able to pull some of them off with how complicated they are. So for the band, we need Ohio State's. No college football Saturday is complete without a little tailgating involved, and the ideal program would have to have the tailgating environment of the Grove at Ole Miss. ESPN announcer Kirk Herbstreit referred to the Grove as the mecca of college football tailgating back in 2022, also saying that it was, quote, tailgating taken to another level. To coach this ideal college football program, we need the coaching history of Alabama. Between Bear Bryant's 6 national titles and Nick Saban's 7 national titles alone, they're at the top, but also all of the coaches that have come out of the Alabama program who either formerly did great things or currently is doing great things as a head coach. For example, Dabo Swinney and Kirby Smart, the top 2 active coaches in college football, both coached at Alabama before getting their first head coaching jobs. Dabo was there for 7 years from 1993 to 2000 as a grad assistant, tight ends coach, and wide receivers coach, and Kirby Smart was there for 8 years from 2007 to 2015 as defensive backs coach and then defensive coordinator. Some other notable coaches from Saban's coaching tree are Mario Cristobal at Miami, Steve Sarkisian at Texas, who was in the college football playoff last year, Dan Lanning at Oregon, Lane Kiffin at Ole Miss, and Billy Napier at Florida. Our ideal college football program would have to have a live mascot, and LSU has one of the scariest animals in the world in the tiger. Mike the Tiger lives on LSU's campus and frequently eats the logo of the opposing team before games. They take his food and whatever type of meat it is and make it into the logo before they feed it to him, and one of the more underrated traditions. It's so cool and something that the ideal college football program would have to have. The facilities at the ideal college football program would have to resemble those at Oregon. Between all the money that they have from Nike and the space that they have out in Eugene for all those complexes, Oregon's facilities are nearly unmatched in college football. Some other great ones are Texas A&M and Clemson and Alabama, but Oregon's have always seemed to be the standard that everyone else is trying to match. The ideal CFB program would have to have the culture of Clemson. There was a period where Clemson did not have a recruit decommit for 7 consecutive years. Dalvin Cook decommitted from Clemson on April 6th, 2013, after being committed for 10 months. So April 6th, 2013, Clemson didn't have another recruit decommit until Corey Foreman did on April 21st, 2020. They went 7 years and 14 days without a true decommitment. They had one guy in 2017 who was committed, but then they more or less told him that he had to find a different school after some news developed about the legitimacy of some of his grades and stuff like that. But outside that situation, 7 straight years where every eligible recruit that committed to Clemson stayed committed to Clemson. Then they have a unique approach to NIL and the transfer portal, more or less not using the portal, but they have tried with certain players in the past. They don't bid on players or offer money up front to entice people to leave the portal, but once they are enrolled and on campus, they do provide NIL and even pioneered some of it. Back in 2021, when DJ Uiagalelei was the quarterback at Clemson, in his NIL deal with Dr. Pepper in Fansville, he became the first college athlete with a national TV commercial. And people may disagree with how they approach the portal and not taking hardly any players, but they're basically the only power conference program that still treats college football like college football and not this professionalized NFL junior type free agency. The ideal college football program must have the recruiting prestige of the Alabama Crimson Tide. Alabama had the number one recruiting class in 2011, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 19, 21, and 23. 10 number one recruiting classes in 12 cycles. And there was a long time where Alabama was basically getting whoever they wanted, and understandably so with the way that Saban was winning national titles. So the ideal college football program would have to be able to recruit like Alabama. Some other features that the ideal program would have to include are Michigan's winged helmet and Notre Dame's golden domes. Those would have to be the primary and alternate helmets for the ideal program's team. I'd say they're the two best and most unique helmets in college football. You could also put Ohio State up there when they have the Buckeye Leafs and stuff on them, but I always find the debate over who has the best helmet kind of funny, because outside of literally Michigan, and you could say Delaware too because they're the same, and Notre Dame, every other helmet is almost subjective as to whether or not you like the color or the logo or how those two kind of combine. But Michigan and Notre Dame and Ohio State to some extent, when the helmet is like towards the end of the season when the helmets are pretty much covered with those stickers and stuff. But outside of that, though, there's not a whole lot of unique helmets that are primary. There's a lot of like alternate, like one-time use helmets that are cool. But for primary unique helmets, I'd have to go with Michigan and Notre Dame as the best two, and those would be included at the ideal program. The ideal program's hand sign would have to be that of NC State and the wolf that they make. I've always liked it for some reason. If you don't know what their hand sign is, if you're watching on YouTube, you can see. But if you're listening on a podcast, it's like Texas's, but then instead of horns, those are like the ears. And then with the other three fingers, they kind of make a mouth out of it, and it resembles a wolf. But I almost picked Texas for the hand sign, though, but it just gets mocked too much with the horns down and everything. No one ever really does Wolfpack down, so it just seemed like a better option with no downside. But the ideal college football program would have the hand sign of the NC State Wolfpack. Our stadium song would be Wisconsin's Jump Around. That always gets the crowd going, gets the players going, really just boosts morale. There's this awesome video of Gus Johnson and Joel Klatt at one of the Wisconsin games dancing to it up in the booth and stuff. So really just gets everybody going, and it sounds good. So the ideal program's field would have to have the maintenance of that at Oklahoma. Jason Fairs and the guys in Norman do a great job with the Sooners field, and it's usually pretty rare that I sit down to watch a game and notice how the grass is cut, but that is frequently the case with OU. Some traditions that the ideal program would need are Iowa's end of the first quarter tradition, in which they wave to the Children's Hospital that overlooks Kinnick Stadium. One of the best traditions in college football, and every time they do a feature on it on game day or just on ESPN or something, it's always very sweet, and one of the best traditions overall that they've made it more than the game. So that would have to be included at the ideal program. At the end of the third quarter, we need Florida's tradition of turning off the main lights and singing I Won't Back Down by Tom Petty. They also sync up the lights on people's phones through an app, and it creates this really cool effect inside the stadium. And then, like I said, they turn the main like white lights off, and then a lot of stadiums have this now, but then they can have all these colored lights that are orange and blue and stuff like that, and really creates a cool environment inside the swamp. And then our post-game tradition would be West Virginia's in singing Take Me Home, Country Roads by John Denver. If you go to the CFB Kings Instagram page, you'll see at the top of the posts that I have one pinned from 2022 where the Mountaineers are singing after beating Baylor. It's been one of my favorite posts for a while now, and just the scene in that stadium after that game specifically, but also every other time they sing it, it's always just really special and seems like a great time and something that I'd really love to see in person sometime in the future. Then to finish it up, the ideal program's field would have the checkered end zone of the Tennessee Volunteers in Neyland Stadium. It's really one of the only unique ones. All of the others, just like the helmet conversation, are pretty subjective, and it just depends on whether or not you like the team's name or mascot or slogan or something like that, whatever they have in the end zone to signify their team. But Tennessee's checkered end zone is really the most unique, and would have to be included with the ideal college football program. And last but not least, our turnover prop, which we'd hopefully be breaking out a lot, would be the turnover chainsaw at Oregon State. My favorite turnover prop, one of the best in terms of fitting into the program and the whole, beaver theme and everything. It also just looks awesome. So we'd have to have the turnover chainsaw from Oregon State with the ideal college football program. So to recap, in order to build the ideal college football program, I'd take the success of Alabama, the location of App State in Boone, North Carolina, the player entrance at Clemson, the fan loyalty of Nebraska, the stadium atmosphere of a Penn State whiteout game, the stadium design of Texas A&M's Kyle Field, the students at the University of Florida, the band at Ohio State, the tailgating at Ole Miss, the coaches historically at Alabama, the live mascot of LSU's Mike the Tiger, the facilities at Oregon, the culture at Clemson, the recruiting at Alabama, the helmets of Michigan and Notre Dame, the hand sign of NC State's Wolf, the stadium song of Wisconsin's Jump Around, the field maintenance at Oklahoma, the first quarter tradition of Iowa, third quarter tradition of Florida, and post-game tradition of West Virginia, and then the end zone design at Tennessee, and the turnover prop at Oregon State. So let me know what you think in the comments below. I know there's going to be a lot of differing opinions. It's a very subjective topic, and people are going to want their team involved in one way or another. But definitely let me know what you think down in the comments or on Instagram, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. That's going to wrap it up. Make sure to leave a like and subscribe if you're watching on YouTube or wherever you're listening on podcast, and make sure to come back next time for some more college football content. Thank you so much for watching. Have a fantastic rest of your day, and take care.